Hello everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of G.GOES Live. I have with me my very good friend slash tutor at Per-vurt as well, Zahzah. He is a live performer as well. He uses Ableton, and tonight's session will cover live performance using Ableton software and of course the Ableton Push 2 or 1 or 3 maybe later on.
Yes.
And of course we are going to discuss all the aspects of live performance, whether you are a producer or a DJ or a live band or a guitar player or whatever, and you want to take your talent to another level of performance. This is the right session for you to watch from now till the end. Don't miss anything. We have so much to talk about. So how are you, Mo?
Hey, pleasure being here. It was really good, feeling good about it. Cool.
How is your summer so far? Because now you're preparing for so many things, I guess.
Yes, my summer has been busy also a lot because I'm also learning jazz. So I'm learning clarinet and guitar. So I have a lot of workshops that I'm going to attend. One that is in Turkey, specific for Turkish jazz.
Nice.
So yes, and I've done a couple of performances, with my band. We were a full band, me, a violin player, and a singer slash dancer. We had one in Radio Beirut, and then I had two other performances. It was just me and the dancer. The violin player wasn't with us, and we had two great performances.
Great, so you have more stuff to prepare for the summer as well,
Yes.
besides giving the course also as Per-vurt,
Yes.
which we will be talking about tonight. And tell me more about your background. You come from a musical background, you learned by yourself. How did you study music in the first place?
Yes, so at school we started studying music at a very early age. We started with the recorder, which is the little plastic flute that everyone hates. And then this is where I really liked music, and I bought a guitar, and I had my first teacher there who taught me the basics of guitar. And then I became a teenager and I kind of shifted away a bit from music. I was going through school and all the teenage things.
Girl stuff.
Also that, yeah. And then when I came here, I picked up music. I took a music course in LAU, and the professor changed my life and my whole view about music, and he basically became my mentor. And I picked it up again now on a more advanced level, of course. And throughout these times, I found myself that I was taking more electronic performances with my guitar and my other instrument, and that basically shaped who I am today.
Great. So you come from a background, you play a certain instrument or two or whatever, and you needed something to take this into a more into performance.
Yeah.
So tell me, how did you discover Ableton? And because Ableton is the software that you're using.
Yes.
How did you discover Ableton, and what did it provide you? What are the things that it gave you to facilitate what you want to do and what you always wished to do as a one-man band, or maybe having people with you as well on stage?
Yeah, so I discovered Ableton in 12th grade, actually. It was the year I was graduating. I discovered it through a friend who also was into music production, and he told me that this is a great program, you can produce at home and then take it out live and do some improvisation. And I was like, yeah, this is really cool. So I picked it up from there, and I started production first, and then when I got more comfortable with the program, I discovered the Push, and this is where it took me to another level.
Great. So Push is the hardware machine MIDI controller by Ableton. Push 1 was designed by Akai, and
Yeah.
Push 2 is a completely redesigned, I mean, not as how it looks like, but Ableton is now designing it, producing it, etc., and it's fully integrated with the software, with Ableton Live. There are so many things that you can not do while you are performing live.
Yes.
For example, for people who, for example, use like pedals to loop stuff live, it's kind of, somehow I hear this a lot from those people, it's kind of annoying, or it's not always perfect, etc. It's too limited to use those old style loop devices. So Ableton was there to give you like this endless scene of loops that you can take, capture on the fly, record, edit, delete, maybe change, etc. So tell me about your first experience with Ableton Live on stage. What did you do? Did you prepare your scene? And what is it all about? What is this scene technology that only Ableton has nowadays?
Yeah, so basically live performance is all about preparing for your live set. Whether you're deep house DJing, playing looping music or techno, or you're playing other stuff which are experimental or harmony or melodic. So it's all about preparing and having everything you want in order. But also while keeping space for improvisation or more creative things that happen on stage and interactions with other musicians. So basically the scene element of Ableton allows you to prepare everything you need for, let's say, one scene of the show or one track of the show or whatever it is you want. It allows you to choose the time signature, the tempo, which instruments you want to use for this specific scene, the loops, the tracks, every element you want on one scene. And just by a click of a button, you can switch the other scene, which you also have prepared, and it just switches up all those other instruments or other drum sounds that you want just with a push of a button.
So it's like preparing a full track, let's say, with all its aspects.
Yeah.
Whether you're using instruments or sounds or loops or things you have pre-recorded, and have them ready for you to start launching, controlling, maybe do all the improvisations by clicking on the scene launch on the push or any other controller. So that's the main purpose of the scene section. And also not only performers use Ableton Live, it's also made for producer. For example, in my case, I do not perform live, but I use the scene section in Ableton, where you have all those empty slots. You can fill clips, or whether they are audio clips or MIDI clips. You can have them prepared, or you can have them on the fly. You can record them live, and in just one push of a button you can launch clips together coming from different channels, different sounds. Maybe you can also start mixing between scenes as well.
Yes, of course.
So that's the it's a non-linear way of working with your project, because you don't work on a timeline. The scene section on Ableton is only loop based.
Yes.
And by the way, guys, when we say loops, we don't really mean that you are using loops from sample libraries. A loop is a section that you might have recorded or pre-recorded. That's your own creation as well, but you can use all those elements of your track live on stage to control them. For example, you want the bass line to come now, you just click on the button with a certain color nowadays, and the bass line will be launched. You want to stop the bass line, you can stop it. And what else can you do with this push controller, which is a grid-based 64 pads, touch sensitive and color responsive as well?
Yes.
What else can you do with it?
Well, I think that they've done an amazing job in the integration between software and hardware. I think when a software company makes hardware, I think this is the ultimate thing.
Exactly, because it's fully integrated with the software.
It's fully integrated. So everything the software can do, you can do it with the push. Whether you want to modulate effects, you want to play chords, you want to play melodies, you want to play live drums, live synthesis, whatever you want. Everything is there, just on one pad.
So it's just a board, if I can say.
Yeah, board.
Instead of using the keyboard and the mouse, or instead of using a lot of maybe shortcuts, which are very important as well.
Yes.
And you have this device, the Ableton Push 2, that gives you all the possibilities of captioning, recording, editing, modulating, automating, mixing, everything. It's just so many keywords that you can do with the push. And if we go back to the software, which is Ableton itself, as a software in general, if you can think of, for example, the top 5 strong points of the software for you as a performer, what can you think of directly, like the first 5?
Yes.
And there are many, by the way.
Yeah, there are much more than 5, exactly. If I would have to choose 5, I think the one main advantage is having 2 views, the session view and the arrangement view. which
The arrangement is the linear one, which
Yes.
works on the timeline, which
exactly.
is the common view.
The common
among
view
all
of all the
softwares.
DAWs. But having both on one software, I think this is great, because once you're familiar with the arrangement and you go to the session view, it's much easier to integrate into this, to be familiarized with the session view. Another feature, I would say, the low latency of the effects. I mean, those are a lifesaver, because I've never had any latency issues, no matter how many effects I put. If I want to put a reverb on my guitars, whether a delay on my clarinet, it's just exactly when I play it comes out. There's very, very low latency, and the effects sound really good.
Do you use Max for Live? By the way, we will be talking about Max for Live as well,
Yes.
which is a like an engine that operates with Ableton Suite, and this has a lot of other
Yes.
devices, which we will, by the way,
We will
talk about in a
about,
minute. Do you
yes.
use it a lot?
I don't use it a lot, but I do use it. Yes, I do use it because it's an open source community behind it, where everyone can build their presets or the patches they want to enhance Ableton. I think there are some amazing people in the community that have done an amazing job. You know, those little details where it's just very specific that, you know, a huge company will not do it. So you have another guy, you know, on his laptop, and he
An
did
engineer.
exactly. He coded this patch and he gave it out for free, and it's just absolutely amazing.
And by the way, before you go on with the list, for you who don't know what Max for Live is, Max for Live is an engine which is, as I said, it operates through Ableton Live Suite, and it has a different set of effect units or MIDI effect units or even instruments, and those units are designed by engineers or people who like to code, or just people who are just writing the backbone of the software. It's
Yes.
like people engineering, designing new plugins, not by Ableton. It's an open source where you can code something and produce your own device, and those devices are not available in the standard version of Ableton or in the light version of Ableton. This is an extra set of devices, and by the way, you can edit the build of this
Yes.
of
The
this
patches,
this
yeah.
plugin. So you can get inside the editor of Max for Live and change some aspects. Let's say if an engineer did a filter cut off from a certain frequency to another, and you just want to change that limit, you can get inside this coding of the plugin and just change it. Or you can design your own. You can learn how to do coding for Max for
Yes.
Live as well. So you talked about 2 or 3 features.
Yes.
And what else? What is another strong point of
A strong
Ableton?
point would be the quantization of the whole program. I think it's absolutely amazing. You know, just the MIDI clip settings alone, you know, where you can loop it and then stop the looping or quantize it by a click of button. I think this really helps for production to make things faster, or even in live performance when you need to do something live. Let's say a singer sang something, and you put it directly on the software, and you want to manipulate this live. I think it's beautiful the way it warps it and quantize it with the beat. I think you can do a lot of things with it.
Great. So it's made for live performance.
Yes, yes.
And for production as well.
Yes,
So
of course.
as a performer, if, for example, you want to take loops on the fly, you have a Turkish clarinet,
Yes.
and let's say you have a pre-recorded set of drum loops. You have them set in a certain package, in a certain maybe Ableton pack you create for yourself, and you have them all on your Ableton push. So let's say now you get a new idea and you want to record it live. You can still do that, right?
Yes.
And that's the you can record it directly into any empty slot that is available on the push, and you can just trigger it and manipulate it and automate it and
Exactly.
etc.
Yeah.
And for that, of course, you need a sound card through which you can
Yeah.
you
yes.
can record. And by the way, guys, because everything is MIDI nowadays, it's MIDI triggered and stuff, you can link the trigger on the record button using a pedal,
Yeah.
a very small pedal, very cheap pedal. And when you step on it, you can just trigger the record
Yes.
button while you are busy with 2 hands doing something. And the beautiful thing about it is that when you stop the recording, when you press again or step again on it, it follows something called global quantization.
Yes.
So what is it exactly?
So it's let's say you chose the beat grid to be, let's keep it simple, on 1. So
That's 1 bar.
Yes, 1 bar. So every 4 beats, it either records on beat 1 and then ends on the beat 1 of the second bar. So you have a perfect bar.
Exactly, and that's a quantization. That's the global quantization. So everything in Ableton will follow that, whether you are triggering something or whether you are actually previewing some loops from your library. And that's something really I find very interesting for me personally, is that even if you are still in the browser window, you did not import anything into the project yet. When you click on something inside the project, inside the browser window, even if it doesn't have the same tempo of your project, it will play, first of all, at the same tempo. Second, it will play exactly at the beginning of each bar. So even if you click on it while the music is playing, it will not launch itself, but on the beginning of the bar. So you're always quantized, you're always there.
Yes.
Even if you're still in the browser, you have more and more and more options to just to try things out, how they will sound together if you import this to a project. So before you even do that, Ableton is also giving you this capability.
And also, if you don't want to quantize, there's also that. If you don't,
can quantize on different signatures.
Yes.
Like you can quantize on one phrase, which is 4 bars, and that's, I think it's very important for you as a performer, because if you want to stop many clips at the same time, and if you choose a quantization that is 1 phrase, you have 1 complete phrase time for you to click on things you want to stop, and they will keep holding. They will not stop until they reach the beginning of the new phrase. And that's very important for performance and for producers as well. I use it a lot. I use the scene view a lot while I produce it, because I can record my performance directly on the timeline in the arrangement section. So what else? Do you have something in mind that is it's like a strong point using Ableton?
I would say also cross-platform, I think, because in my case, my studio has a PC Windows, but when I'm on stage, I use Mac. So I can still do everything on the comfort of my studio, on the PC, big screen, and fix the project and prepare. And all I have to do is just drag the project, put it on my laptop.
So it's the same format.
It's the same
it works
thing.
on both.
Yes.
On Mac and Windows, because it's so many cases when you use a Mac and you want to continue this project with someone else. Maybe you want to collaborate, for example, or send a file to someone who is not on the same platform. He's using Mac or Windows or whatever, and this file doesn't open because it's a different platform. So with Ableton, they opened this possibility for everyone to work together. And by the way, I remember something now, since we're talking about sharing stuff and working at the same time. There's a new feature in Ableton which is amazing, which is the Ableton link. Have you used it?
Yes, I have used it once. It's absolutely perfect. You just have to have 2 computers on the same Wi-Fi, and they're linked. Both projects are linked. They follow the same quantization, the same tempo. I can, while I play the drums, another person plays the chords, the harmonies, or the melodies, and they're both on time, on sync. It's absolutely perfect.
Great. So, if, for example, everyone can jam with you nowadays.
Everyone
they
can
have
jam
to get in the same network.
Yes.
And for example, if someone is perfect with drums and the other one is perfect with, let's say, melodies, and he has an application also on his phone. By the way, most of the applications nowadays, they have this link button, the Ableton link, which is something new by Ableton. And for example, someone on the first floor can join with us. If we are performing here, and someone else can join in, and we can all jam together. That's really something very important. And by the way, I use it also in the school here, because we have 4 stations. We have four students, and at one of the project files that I give the students, they can jam together. For example, each 2 can create a track. They follow the same quantization, the same timing, everything, and they start to collaborate together on the same on the same timeline, same project. So if we can also discuss other features in Ableton, if for example while you are producing, what is also something that you always say thank you Ableton for that?
I think rack building and grouping, I think these are very important, because
what is it exactly, the word rack? Because some people don't know it.
Yeah, so it's either a drum rack For example, you have your kick, your snare, your clap, your hi-hats, your percussions, all on one rack, and each element of this rack can be has its own effect. So the rack is basically endless. So that's basically a drum rack, and you have also an effect rack, which I use more than a drum rack for live performance. I have a certain patch that I patch myself. Let's say I want a chorus, then a reverb, then a delay, or whatever I patch, and they're all on the same rack. And I can have 2-3 racks on the same channel, and I can just turn off one rack and turn off the other, and just the whole grouping and organization is just perfect.
So with racks, you can have multi-chains of effects, and
Exactly.
And there's something really interesting in racks, which is the macro controls.
Yes, the
And
macro controls.
with macro controls, you can assign 8 macro knobs
Yes.
to do multiple
Yeah.
effects at the same time. So for example, you can link macro 1 to increase the delay by maybe 20% while decreasing the reverb by 10%, and while, for example, turning on a certain device
Yes,
the moment
on,
you
off,
turn the knob,
yes.
and do X, Y, Z, etc. So it's like you build your own chain of effects. You can use it in DJing, by the way. It's I know people
Also,
who use Ableton just as an effect processor. They work on the Pioneer, for example. They have a line output, whether through a direct line output or through send and return. They pass through Ableton. They use all those effects on the signal, and they go back to the master channel. So that's how you build racks. You have 8 macro controls, and those macros can also be assigned to a MIDI controller and to the push.
Of course.
So the good thing about the push 2 also is that you can, with the big screen on push 2, you can see everything. Whether you are looking for the waves, you want to trim them or you want to edit them, whether you are looking at certain parameters, whether you are browsing stuff, you have this visual representation of everything in the browsing, and also you can also access your plugins.
Yes.
Do you use a lot of Ableton devices, or you use a lot of plugins as well?
When I'm live on stage, of course it's Ableton, because to me they're the only plugins that have the lowest latency out of all the digital audio workstation. Now, and when I'm in the studio, I do use some third-party plugins also, some things that are not available in Ableton. Third-party plugins that are, for example, a live manipulator, where you can harmonize voices, for example.
And this is something you do in your own
on my own shows, yeah, I sometimes do them live. Because Ableton allows me to play chords, I can play chords while the person is singing and just harmonizes with the singer. It just sounds amazing.
You have all those MIDI
things.
effects and audio effects, and the Max for Live engine as well. We discussed some parts of it. And you have so many features in the software as well. For example, something came to mind now where we can freeze a track and flatten it.
Yes.
That's
very
really
important.
something
Yes.
to save a lot of CPU consumption.
DSP,
And
yep.
yes, exactly. So when you have, for example, a channel with an Ableton device, a synthesizer maybe, and you have a chain of effects like reverb, those consume a lot of CPU.
Yes.
And when you are done with this certain setting of your notes and how they are processed, etc., you can just freeze the track. Ableton will convert this track into audio and put the audio file in the temporary file, of course, while
Yes.
keeping all the devices in freeze mode. So you
Yes.
cannot touch them anymore. Ableton is not processing anything in MIDI or anything through the plugins anymore or through the effect units, but it saved a copy of it in the temporary file,
Yes.
and you are just hearing an
Wave,
audio
yeah.
wave, which doesn't take a lot of CPU, while keeping the option for you to unfreeze the track, change anything you want in it, whether you want to change the note position or the note length or even the settings of your devices or even the automation, etc., etc., etc. And when you're done with it, freeze it, because with this you will save a lot of CPU. Because sometimes
Yes.
when you start working on multi-tracks that have a lot of stuff going on, you will find your CPU meter, of course, if you don't have a powerful computer, your CPU meter will be above 50-60%,
Yes.
and that's when you get audio dropouts.
Dropouts.
Do you do this in live? Because in live that's very important. If you have audio dropouts, that's a scary thing.
Yes, of course I do. Some tracks, for example, if I'm playing guitar, of course I will not play guitar and play my drums. So my drums are technically stable, for example, on one scene. So I will freeze that track with all the effects that I want, and I will keep it frozen. I wouldn't go to the wave, just in case I want to manipulate things with the drums, because sometimes I do that. It's frozen at first, you know, I play my melodies, he sings this part, then maybe it's a part where he wants to dance, so I unfreeze it and I go play.
You
with
change
the drums
parameters and stuff, exactly.
You know,
because in the other option of freeze, you have the flatten, and flatten
Yes.
is when Ableton really
you can't go back. Yeah.
really cancels the everything, all the units from your channel, and it will turn your channel from, for example, a MIDI channel to a completely audio channel with only a wave clip in it. So you don't have any devices or the plugins or etc. And I don't see a point to do that while you are performing or while you are producing, but it's a good point to do it, for example, if you want to send your project file to a mixing engineer, or you want to send it to someone, you want to collaborate on something, maybe he doesn't have your plugins or whatever, you just save another copy of Ableton, you flatten everything, you send only wave for mixing purposes or for other purposes. And by the way, with Ableton you can also collect all and save, so you can collect all the samples and everything you used inside one project file, and you can share it. So you use this, for example, if you want to collaborate with someone.
Yes, of course. If I have a synth sound that I really like and I'm collaborating with someone, I just flatten it, send him the wave, you know, with all the effects that I have, and he can just have it.
Exactly. That's also something they keep in mind always, and they focus a lot on it, to have collaboration and jamming, and and that's the mentality of the Ableton. They want it to be like an open source with everyone to come in. It's like a community nowadays, where people share a lot of stuff, a lot of presets, a lot of ideas, and Ableton, of course, it's now in the top chart.
Yes, I mean the community is super powerful. I think it's a big plus. I'll put it in my advantages for Ableton. The community is just so giving. They give so much, you know, tips and tricks and plugins and presets and patches. It's just amazing.
Even the packs they create, they have like
really the packs and
good sounds.
And the company is so responsive to the community, because the community is that powerful. They have to be responsive. I think it's a big responsibility. It's a big plus to have a strong community. Because now, let's say, you know, because they get feedback, and through the feedback of the community, they give out the best products.
Exactly, yes. And they listen a lot to people who are facing some problem, or people who would like to have new feature, for example. And I always see responses, people thanking Ableton for that, etc. And the good thing about Ableton as well is that you can have unlimited number of channels.
Yes.
And the suite and maybe the center. You have unlimited number of channels. So for example, let's imagine you are in a real studio with a console, an SSL maybe, that has, I don't know, maybe
an orchestra, let's say,
120 something channels. That is like a $1 million mixer. So in Ableton you can have more than that. And if that board has some limited number of sends and return and effects or EQs, in Ableton you can have unlimited. So you can have unlimited channels, whether they are audio and MIDI. You can also have unlimited number of scenes. So imagine you have unlimited sounds there waiting for you to trigger. So you can play maybe a set for 24 hours and it won't stop. By the way, live is too hard. You can't play more than specific number of hours.
1 hour is like a week of preparation.
Because it's fully there. You're there with short clips and short samples and loops. You're not playing, like, you're not DJing. You're just performing, and you can perform. For example, you can remix on stage as well. Have you ever remixed something?
Yes, I think live performance is all about the balance that you want. I mean, how much improvisation do you want versus how much the computer does the work. I think for me, it's each show has its own thing. Sometimes I like to fully improvise, where I'm playing each note, and I cut the song and I play each sample and I remix it live. Sometimes I'm more on the let me just play the track and I'll chill with my guitar. So it really depends of the show, and I think the beauty of Ableton, gives you the whole spectrum.
And I just want to talk about something important also in Ableton, is how you can send MIDI from the software, from Ableton to analog devices, to,
Yes,
for
yes,
example,
yes.
the Sub 37 or whatever. Sometimes because you might have a lot of stuff in the studio or on
Yes.
stage, and you can't have like 10 hands, so you just
Yes.
send those MIDI clips. Those are the MIDI triggers.
information even.
MIDI information, whatever you're playing, whether they are chords or notes or arps, you can send them to a to external source like
Yes.
a synthesizer, and you can just tweak things on the synthesizer while the MIDI clock is triggering the notes
Yes.
for you. that's really
Yes,
important.
and some synthesizer also have the knobs. You know, the knobs can receive MIDI. For example, the cutoff filter of a synthesizer can be automated through Ableton. I think that's super powerful.
That's powerful because also when you have the 0 to 128 MIDI message, you can have anything automated that
Yes.
goes to those levels, whether they are pitch shifts or filter cutoffs or anything like that can be automated as well. So let's talk a little bit about since we talked about the synthesizer and the melodic stuff, let's talk about the harmony side of whether production or performance. And as I can see that Ableton and with Push as well, they did something very interesting for people who did not study
Music.
notes.
Yes.
So what are those advantages?
So for the Ableton Push, it allows you to select which scale you're playing. Not only that, allows you also to change it while on the screen without going into the computer or changing the scale on Ableton. You can change it on the pad, the Ableton Push. I think it's super powerful because
now you have a new way of playing
exactly,
notes.
and the way they are structured, you know, you have the fourth that's above it, the fifth that's on diagonal, and you have the scale going horizontally. You can play chords in such a simple way
By following a certain
1, 3, 5. That's
finger triangle
Yes,
shape, and
exactly.
wherever you press on
Yes.
that machine, which is the push to, following the same shape
Exactly.
of the triangle, you're playing the 1, 3, 5 or whatever chord you're in key
Yes.
with it. So for people who do not know much about music theory, with all the technology nowadays and with all the formulas that you can integrate with the software,
Yes.
you can compose something with zero mistake when it comes to
Yes.
harmonies and stuff. Because
Yes.
also in Ableton Push, the way it's designed and the illuminated pads, when you select a certain key or scale, there's an option, it turns off all the notes that are out of your key, and all the notes that are in key, they
Yes.
are illuminated. So whatever note you press on in the key, you are always in the same scale
Yes.
and key, and you're always in harmony with whatever you
Yes.
are producing or mixing with as DJing or remixing as well.
Yes, I think it's having the two modes is really important because you know, you have the in-key mode where all the pads are in the scale, so whatever you press is gonna be in scale, and you have the chromatic mode, which allows you to play the other notes that are off scale, what we call accidental notes or off scale notes, but they are not lit. So you know that you are going, let's say, to a flat 5 instead of a 5. So it allows you to add more richness, like you can play minor blues or more jazzy stuff.
Exactly, because it's not always about natural minor, natural
Exactly,
major. You have
exactly.
so
You know,
many
you have
subs, keys and
Exactly.
stuff.
There are some scales, for example, in Oriental music, where if you're going up, it's one scale, and when you're going down the scale, it's a different notes, and it gives it this. I think having this ability, I do use it, and having this ability to play, to be versatile with your scale, you're basically playing an instrument, and that's the beauty of it.
And of course, with the new technology as well, implemented with every single update, now they can let you also have more MIDI effects when it comes to melodies and chords.
Yes.
And for
MIDI
example, you can
effects.
press one pad, which is a C note, let's say, and it can play a major C chord for
Yes.
you. And you can start adding to that. You can add, for example, another C from a lower octave to play a bass note with it, and add two more notes unison, for example, from different octaves, same note. And now when you press one pad, or even on the keyboard as well,
Yes.
when you press one note, you are playing maybe 7, 8 notes.
The whole chord, exactly.
And that's also something for people who did not study music, or people who are looking for an easier way to play more notes
Yes.
in one push.
Yes.
That's why it's called
Yes.
a push. And it has a lot of other MIDI effects. For example, you can arpeggiate a
Yes,
chord. Do you use that? Of course.
Yes, of course, I
And
love...
this is called arpeggiator device.
yes.
If you can tell us what it is exactly.
Yes, so the arpeggiator device, if let's say I'm playing sus2 chord, which is 1, 2, and 5, and it just plays 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2,
So
5.
it chops the notes.
Yes.
Whether instead of playing the notes on top of each other as a normal chord.
Instead of
so
playing the chord, it does the tarara, tarara, tarara.
exactly.
Yes.
That's an arpeggiator effect, and with that you can go crazy with
Yeah.
it, because you can have a chord device that can copy
Yes.
copy and paste, if we want, many shifts of notes to create from one push multiple notes, and then those notes all together they come into another device, which is the arpeggiator. That's the importance of chaining devices next to each other.
Yes.
And then when they get into the arpeggiator, it takes all those notes, whether they are 5 or 6 or 7, and it starts to arpeggiate them under certain settings, of course. So if you want it to be an up or down, or up
Convergent,
down, or
divergent.
exactly, you have so
Yes.
many settings in this
Yes.
arpeggiator. And the good thing about Ableton as well is that if you're using the arpeggiator, you're just hearing what's happening, but you don't really see what's going on. And in Ableton, you can just create a channel and take the audio, take the MIDI from the channel where the arpeggiator is, and everything that is coming out of the arpeggiator will be recorded on a channel. So you can actually take
yes.
those patterns of arpeggiations, and you can have them, you can edit them, and you can use them. You can send them to a remixer or whatever.
Yes.
That's also something very, very interesting. I have been using this a lot.
Something I use a lot also in live performance is I changed the arpeggiator sequence on stage live. So first I'm going down, and then I go convergent, and it gives a totally different feel.
And you can map this to your push as well.
Exactly. It's all in the push. Exactly.
So in one click.
In one click, you just chose your different types of arpeggiator you want, and I think it adds more to the improvisation that you want to give to your fans, and the improvisation you want to give to your fans, and the richness of the performance.
Exactly. And the good thing also is when you are performing as well, you can click just record. You are in the scene, you are doing all those stuff, and something on the other side, which is the arrangement view of Ableton, is recording everything you're doing.
Yes.
It's recording the automation, recording how many times or when did you launch a certain clip, or what did you do exactly, and all the MIDI and stuff, those are recorded. So if you want to go back later on to your performance and edit few stuff, maybe you did a happy mistake, for example, on stage.
Happy
You want,
mistakes. Yes.
you want to edit this, and you want to get back to whatever you played, every single detail of what you played. You can go there with all the multi-tracks, all the automation lanes, which you can see one on top of each other, and you can do all your edits. You can click export, and you can have a track ready for release, maybe after, of course, you mix
Yes.
it and you do all the dynamic processing and stuff like that. So do you also use the send return on the push? Do you send return, or you use an insert way of effects?
Actually, a bit of both, because sometimes I use the send, for example, if I want to add a delay just at the end of the phrase, or I want to add a reverb just also at the end of the phrase, or when I'm mixing something.
Without affecting the ones coming after.
Exactly. So I just send it to return, and then
So you take just one part of the sound.
Let's say one beat.
The actual process of effect is happening on another channel we call return, and at that channel you can also tweak it. You can send the reverb signal to the left side of the spectrum. You can pan it left, you can pan it right, because if you use insert devices directly on the channel, you cannot have control over the dry signal and the wet signal. So with the send return, you can have complete control over the wet signal. You can filter it maybe, or you can even send it again to another return channel.
Exactly, and it's easier to access. Actually, it's I use it because it's easier to access on the push. I think that's the beauty of it.
And by the way, with the push too nowadays, when you touch the knob, it calls for a certain parameter, so it's also touch sensitive, the knobs, and you can access so many parameters. Even you can access your the parameters of your plugin.
Each
nowadays.
device.
Device, everything from the push. And I know people who just have the push, they never touch the mouse or the keyboard.
Yes.
They have everything from filling in some drum elements to a clip, because it's all a pattern based, so you just have a sequencer going and you have everything in front of you and you just start to fill in some sounds. That's easy also, because you don't have to quantize anything anymore. You just fill in the pads for each sound and you have clips. Do you use grooves? Because I talked about quantization. Some people don't like quantization that much because they like to keep this human feel. If you're playing, for example, a bass line and you are fully quantized on the grid, it won't sound that human.
Yes, of course.
So that's when you add grooves and swings.
Yes, you can. The arpeggiator has swings and grooves, and again, it allows you adding more richness to your improvisation. Basically, that's the beauty of Ableton Live.
So you take the elements a bit off grid just to imitate the human feel, because as a human you cannot be 100% on the grid or on the metronome if you're recording drums or stuff. So some people coming from not too electronic style, they want to produce electronically, some blues, for example, or jazz. They want to be somehow off grid, and that's also something offered by Ableton. You have a pool where you can choose among hundreds of swing and groove files coming from MPCs to Logic to all those groove setting files, and you can just apply them on whatever clip you're using. It will do this shift of quantization a little bit out of grid, and it also plays with the velocity.
Yes,
because it also can register some velocity curves for you. Some sounds will be played louder than others, etc., etc., etc. So back to the push itself. You got the push and you went there for the first time doing a live act with it. Okay, so how was your experience? And by the way, what is this band that you have, and where do you perform, and what is it all about?
So basically, mainly what we do is experimental music, Oriental experimental music. We keep it on the Arabic side. We do some famous traditional remixes like Kulthum, Abdul Wahab. They are rooted in minimal music. Basically, it's not music that is ma'aj'a, how they say in Lebanese, or
too busy.
Too busy, exactly. That's the word.
That's in Arabic.
So basically, this is what we do. We perform more, and our crowd is not mainly a dancey type of crowd. This is not what we aim for. We don't aim to make people dance. More is from the listening, to listen to the performance that we're delivering. Basically, the harmonies, the violin player, the singer, and also we rely on the visual aspect of it. We have a male belly dancer who's an excellent performer, and we're always interacting on stage. And I think the beauty of Ableton Push is allowing me to interact on stage.
And you are in complete control.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the good thing, as you mentioned earlier in the session, is that you can have those racks. And a good thing about racks, where you build your own chain of effects, or even packages of certain drums where they are all compiled together, is that you can save that preset of the whole rack. So you don't have to bring in again each instrument with its saved samples or whatever. You just click on one rack preset, and everything you prepared before, with samples, instruments in it, effects in it, even automations, and how they are linked to your controller. If of course you saved a template, and we are going to talk about this also, they will be there in front of you. One click, tick, 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 and you're there.
It's amazing. Yes.
So when we talk about dithering and all those post-production or exporting processes, Ableton is offering something really interesting, because when you use a lot of samples or a lot of recorded material coming from different recording settings, whether you are recording on 16 bits to 24-bit, or whether you're recording on a higher sample rate or a lower sample rate, etc., or whether you're using samples coming from different sample libraries, at the end of the day, you want to export one file. And when you export under a setting which is lower than some of the samples that you have recorded or used in your project, that's when you experience some downsampling noise or some really bad effect, if I may call it. So dithering is something that is implemented by Ableton. While you're exporting, you can choose the POW-R dithering to just have your track with no noise. Actually, it generates some noise that goes against the noise,
yes.
and you have a clean export. And if I also want to remember something about this kind of dynamic change and just preserving the quality of a certain recorded element, we can talk about warping as well.
Yes.
You have different warp modes, because sometimes when you are using a loop or when you're recording something and you import it into a project that has a higher BPM or a lower BPM, which is faster or slower, so what happens? You find this stretching noise from the loop. Have you experienced something like that?
Yes, of course. Again, the math behind it is very complex, so I did not go into it. But again, the community has given me enough knowledge to know which type of warping, the different types. If I want to warp drum samples, it's better to use the
beat mode.
Exactly, the beat mode. If I'm doing something more stretchy, like a violin or a vocal, you have the Complex Pro, which the math behind it also, if you're stretching, it fills in those gaps that you have stretched. So Ableton, I think Ableton does an excellent job at that.
Exactly, because with the different warp modes. By the way, warping, guys, for people who don't know what warping is when you insert a marker point that can act as a flag point from which you can stretch a certain sample or stretch it, outward or inward, making it faster or slower, etc.
Without changing the key.
Without changing the key, or with, if you have a warp mode which is texture or tone or repitch. It can also change, go back to original way of dealing with sound, because if you make a sound faster, of course you're pitching the sound up, so the key, the tone, etc., it will change, and that's how the sound is originally. But in today's DAWs and all the softwares, you need to preserve the key most of the time. So when you are importing a sample or recording something from different tempo, and you're importing it to a file which is faster or slower in tempo, you will experience this stretching noise. That's when you preserve the key. Okay, so if you want to preserve the key, that's offered by Ableton, but you need to choose which warping mode to apply, because if you're using a beat mode, for example, and you're shifting a vocal, you're warping a vocal, you're bringing the vocal back on the grid somehow, because in the recording you might experience some offbeat stuff. So you don't tell your recording artist, record again. You just record. I can warp it for you. I can fix it for you. And this is when you are dealing with stretching wave files to make them back on the grid or away a bit off the grid. And this is when you introduce this stretching noise. So if you choose the complex mode, for example, in Ableton, this will work on the grain of the sound, and it will give you almost no bad effect of anything that is being stretched. That's really something very important.
Also, it works the other way around. If I want to repitch something, if I pitch it down, it will stretch, because this is how audio works. But let's say I want to preserve the beat but change the pitch. This is also where warping
it works in a different way.
Exactly, and I use that a lot, because again, when you have a show, and the singer comes, he tells me, I can't sing that high, please, we need to repitch that track back down. And I tell him, man, I worked on it for ages. I can't do that now. God tells me, please. So I take the original track, the full track, the stereo track, or whatever pieces I have, and I just transpose them -1, -2. I've never went more than -3, because
that's when you
really feel, But -1, -2 with Complex Pro or Complex mode, I think Ableton does an excellent job, and I've never complained.
It's really a magical process. And by the way, when Mo said something about changing the transposition of multiple clips, or applying any kind of thing or change to multiple clips, you can just highlight or select many clips or many channels, and anything you do now, it will affect all the channels at the same time.
Yes.
So if they have the same feature to be manipulated, otherwise you have to just group them, and that's also one feature of Ableton. You can group channels together. For example, if you have many vocal tracks, you can have them in one group. Some other software, they call them like buses, or OGs or whatever. You can have an audio channel that can act as a master channel for those tracks in it.
Yes.
And the good thing in this session is that this master channel has also a trigger play button to play only the clips on this specific scene inside this specific group. And you can still have the option of playing the whole scene with other channels and other groups with the Ableton scene. That's mainly most of the topics. If we want to talk about Ableton, we need maybe 10 hours or more to talk about how good this software is and how amazing this technology of push. It saved a lot of time. By the way, some shortcuts are not available on your keyboard, or not available when you do right-click stuff, and on push you have them. So that's kind of also smart from Ableton. Like, for example, if you want to record something in your sequencer, when you want to just get drums together, it's already quantized. And in Ableton, there is no shortcut for that. You have to go to edit, quantize during recording, etc. And you have so many other shortcuts available on the push itself that you cannot find on as a shortcut on your software.
And something very important that people don't talk is the graphic design of the push is the same as the Ableton.
That's why, as you said, it's better to have a piece of gear that has the same brand of the software.
Because when you're live on stage and you're doing many things, having the same graphic design, you're directly talking to your subconscious, and your brain is not processing that much information because it's the same graphic design. I think it's also something amazing.
And with all the colors responding to you,
exactly,
you can just go by color. All the yellow stuff are vocals, or the green stuff are etc.
And they stay the same since day one that you started the live project at home. You know, you have the vocals yellow, so you're used to the vocals being yellow. So when you see them on live on the push, they're yellow. So you just you know
what to control, and you know.
Exactly.
And by the way, can you control more than 64? If they give you only 64, can you just?
Yeah, of course.
Can you, because you can shift next.
You can,
and this is when you can have complete control over unlimited channels, unlimited scenes by your Ableton push. Again, you guys, we reached the end of the session. We have so many things to talk about. Maybe we can do a V2 of this episode, because we have so many things to talk about in Ableton. And by the way, Ableton Live Performance using push mainly is a course that we are launching now, me and Mo, online. And it's not an online course, of course, it's a course given at Per-vurt School, but this is the announcement of it. You can learn all about live performance, maybe jamming in the studio, or taking people with you who play instruments and do this electronic band. That's how you call it, electronic band.
Yes.
So if you can just tell us briefly about your course, which is called Ableton Live Performance. What is it about, and what are the main topics that you are going to teach in it?
Yes, so we'll definitely, again, it's all about preparing, and then how we can prepare the student to be able to communicate live. You know, it's not just like you have to do this, press play. No, it's more of like, listen, you can do this or that or that or that. And some of the topics, of course, we'll talk about preparing your project, you know, which sample rate to choose, all those basics.
So you have prerequisites of audio.
Of course, yeah. There are some prerequisites of audio. This is a must. We'll talk about the MIDI clip. This is one of my favorite, because the MIDI clip of Ableton is just so rich. looping, reversing, everything. The MIDI clip is just amazing. It has so many possibilities. Of course, we'll talk about effects, the main effects: reverb, delay, chorus, distortion. We'll talk about these. We'll also talk about a bit of rhythm theory. You have bars, measures, and beats. And of course much more that are more in detail.
So we will be posting, of course, the course title on the new website soon. And of course, with Ableton, as we mentioned, you can do so many things that we couldn't have enough time to cover. And I forgot one of the most important thing, by the way. It's just an end to this episode. It's something really interesting, which is extracting melodies or drum patterns or even harmonies from audio clips. So I'll give you an example. If you have a melodic loop, let's say, and you want to know what notes were played, you can just right-click extract melody to new MIDI channel, and Ableton will convert this audio to MIDI notes, and you will by then know what notes this artist played. And of course, something really I did once when I was driving my car to Per-vurt. I was listening to a track, a commercial maybe song on the radio, and I was just building a melody on top of it in my head, and I really liked this melody to use it on a separate project that has nothing to do with the track I was listening to. So I was whistling a new melody that is going harmonically with the track, and I recorded my whistle. So I went to the studio, I got this wave file of my whistle, just a whistle, and I converted this to MIDI because I by then have forgotten this maybe. So it converted my whistle so perfectly to MIDI notes, and from there I started constructing a new track.
It's amazing.
And again, you guys, thank you for watching the 8th episode of G.GOES Live, which is broadcasting every Wednesday at 10 p.m. from the new renovated Per-vurt studio. What do you think of Per-vurt?
It's huge. It's amazing. I love it. Really amazing progress.
And you guys wait for, if you're interested, of course, in learning more about live performance and this new trend, if I may call it, which is implementing live electronic band in one small setup, if I may call it. You can check our website or contact us to explain to you more about the course and give you more insights about the syllabus. And the course will start very soon, by the way, and it's given by Zahzah, a very talented performer who is also integrating everything he knows and he does in Push and Ableton. So until the next episode, you guys, be good, be safe. Thank you for watching. If you like this episode, you can share it. And for people who joined later on, you can, of course, find this episode in HD because I'm shooting from multiple cameras now. This won't be online for long. And I will be, of course, posting a better quality, full version, edited version of this episode on my page, which is facebook.com/per-vurt-records. Go to videos, go to G.GOES Live playlist, and you can find all the 8 episodes of G.GOES Live there. Share them if you like them, and until then, we send you all our greetings and love. Good night, you guys.
Bye bye.